Well, I think certainly for the foldable screen, obviously there is going to be appetite for it. The caveat here basically is that in the initial run, a foldable screen is going to be incredibly expensive, probably more even than the top end of the iPhone. The question is, and this is actually, foldable screens have actually been around since 2012. The problem was they could never manufacture them in the kind of scale to actually launch a product. Perhaps now they've solved some of those problems, but the real thing to watch for is, can they push that kind of technology right down into the mass market? Because that's where the volume and the real profit will lie.
Richard, how much will this change the fortunes of what's happening in the smartphone market? We saw in the last quarter Samsung really feeling the pressure of the slowing market. Will this stoke growth?
I don't think so, to be honest with you. Samsung's position in the smartphone market has been reasonably stable for some considerable amount of time now, and you have got a lot of insurgents coming in from the bottom, particularly from China, getting a big share in India, and Xiaomi, which has done very well over the last 12 months or so. What Samsung needs to do is to do what it does best, which is to innovate in hardware and to manufacture those innovations at massive volume, because it is on massive volume, even on a commodity type product, that Samsung makes its profit.
Samsung's certainly been a volume player, but I want to address another side of the business that they've been trying to push very hard, and that's around services. They've got a number of their own service and apps products in the market. Of course, Bixby as well. They're trying to push that very heavily too. But what does Samsung need to do to have a successful services business? Because the problem, of course, is that they run on Android. It's very difficult for them to control the ecosystem. So where do they go next with that?
Well, to be honest with you, my position on this for some time has been that Samsung should stop doing services. If you look at Bixby, if you look at the user's impression of Bixby, you could actually quite easily make the case that Bixby is a reason not to buy a Samsung phone. Now, in that regard, arguably, they should actually stop trying and invest the money elsewhere. My position on it has been quite simple, is they should deepen their partnership with Google, maybe get some of Google's great innovations out onto devices in volume, with a little bit of an exclusive to give them maybe a 6-month edge, because if you look at Google is really struggling in hardware, and so a deeper partnership between the two could actually benefit both of them.
You wouldn't agree with a piece I read earlier that suggested Samsung, given the scale as the world's largest smartphone maker, bring back its own operating system in the form of Tizen?
No, because I think what you would see is, where Samsung is the biggest manufacturer, but it is the biggest manufacturer of commodity products, and this is what it does well. Just look across semiconductors, it manufactures commodity products in massive scale, and on that basis makes good margin. The problem is, if you then say, right, we're switching to Tizen, all of its users can suddenly go, well, hang on a minute, there's actually a very decent, there are plenty of other opportunities where the user experience is almost exactly the same. If you're going to force me to use Tizen, perhaps I'll go elsewhere. So I think that's a very, very unlikely scenario.
Richard, picking up on everything you just told us, I get the sense that you're a little bit skeptical about the whole Samsung story, especially perhaps given that as a valuation play, it trades at a premium versus its competitors. Do you think that Samsung justifies that?
I haven't really had a problem with Samsung's valuation for a while. I mean, it's certainly not the cheap stock that it was when I really was pushing it maybe 3 years ago. The thing about it is that what Samsung does is it utterly dominates 3 segments, and those 3 segments it shows very good profitability in. And quite frankly, its competitors have failed to really make any impact on it. So I would look at Samsung's profitability at this point in time as not being desperately under threat. And on that basis, looking at its cash flow and looking at its outlook, maybe very slow, steady growth, Samsung's valuation is not that challenging.
Rich, one thing that's got investors in Samsung excited, of course, has been the trends in semiconductors over the past couple of years. That is high demand and low supply that's pushed those prices higher and really allowed that semiconductor to be a very profitable business for Samsung. Is that under threat at the moment, even as they continue to push ahead with new technologies in the semiconductor space?
I don't think so. I think the top line is probably a little bit under threat for a couple of reasons. You're seeing increased verticalization among other companies, which means they're increasingly trying to make silicon themselves. And so that could crimp the demand for some of Samsung's products. Obviously, Samsung Semiconductor has the internal customer, which is Samsung handsets, which is good. But I think what you'll see is, growth is going to be much steadier in the long run. But until someone actually turns up and actually starts to challenge Samsung on volume, then I think its profitability should remain fairly intact.
Hey everybody, it's Hadley Gamble from our new CNBC Middle East Bureau in Abu Dhabi. Thanks for stopping by. Now to watch more, you can try one of the videos that just popped up on your screen. And don't forget to subscribe.